Hello again, and welcome to Beyond the Feed with Media Bodies. We're bringing you an insider look at influencer marketing and the creator economy in general. So I'm Rosie, I'm the head of business development at Media Bodies, and we're talking about a topic today that's quite an interesting one and definitely a very present one for us at the moment with so much of it going on at Media Bodies. But if you've listened to any podcast lately, you've probably heard a VPN ad, or you know what a VPN is at least. So, NordVPN, ExpressVPN, Surfshark, they seem to be absolutely everywhere at the moment. And we want to have a little look at what's going on here. So why are VPNs flooding the space? And to unpack this today, I've got one of my colleagues from Media Bodies here, Rhiannon. And Rhiannon, you're responsible for running a lot of these VPN podcast ads through our agency. So what do you think about this trend and what's driving this surge of VPN activity at the moment?
It's really interesting because I'm the same wherever I am, whatever podcast I'm listening to. I can almost guarantee I'm going to hear a VPN ad. There are just so many of them. And I think there's multiple things driving this trend, just generally and specifically within podcasts. My personal opinion is that because there is so many VPNs advertising in this space, I wonder if it's sort of a FOMO thing. Do all VPNs want to be sort of heard in this context where these listeners are when the others are also in that space advertising?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, in general, VPNs are a more popular thing now and growing in popularity, right, than they were like a year ago even. So I think we're seeing in the industry everywhere that VPNs and new VPNs have been popping up more and more. And so, of course, that's going to come with a huge influx in marketing activity. But you're definitely right. It seems like there is this huge competitiveness and FOMO in the industry about, who can do the most, who can sponsor the most podcasts. And hopefully we can find out why today. So those trends are really prevalent, the surging spend in VPNs, but the VPNs that we work with in Media Bodies, we've seen a lot of trends there as well in how they're working. So before we dive a bit deeper into the why this is happening and why these trends are unfolding the way that they are, it'd be great to have a bit of an overview on the industry and look at which VPN brands are the most present in podcasts, which are spending the most, how much on which verticals, and just really start to break down what their actual activity is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have the VPNs you mentioned, Express, Nord, Surfshark, but there's also smaller VPNs in the space, private internet access. I think there's one called CyberGhost, Proton VPN. There's so
Yeah.
many, spending across so many different verticals.
So tell me about who is at the absolute top of the game then. Which VPN is topping the leaderboard and spending the most?
ExpressVPN seems to have spent the most in 2025 based on the data that we have available. If we're going into exact figures, it's estimating a spend of $7.5 million, with Nord just behind at $2.5 million, and then Surfshark at about $400,000. But Express is slightly different in that they do a lot more dynamic testing than Nord and Surfshark. So they really are inserting themselves into podcasts at a lot more scale than Nord and Surfshark, and they have many repeat bookings.
And at a very top line level, across VPNs in general, which are the most popular verticals that they're sponsoring? Where are they seeing, or where can we assume they're seeing the best success vertical wise?
There's a spread of different verticals across all of them, but generally the main trend I'm seeing is a lot of news commentary, topical themes. There's a lot of links in with current affairs in terms of like data privacy, specific use cases. Particularly with Express, they're really into their news commentary. But I see a lot more like news and sport with Surfshark. I imagine really tying into geo-blocking in the sports area. And again, just targeting so many different potential customers and interests.
And I mean, I suppose these, like you said, the kind of news commentary vertical can perform so well because at the very core of it, the reason people are interested in VPNs is for kind of tech and cyber security and to, for privacy. And that has a lot of the same themes, like you said, with current affairs and real stories that are happening every day all over the world of exactly why, demonstrating why we should be using VPNs.
100%. I mean, an interesting stat I saw as well was half of VPN users use it through their work, which is more likely to be motivated by
Oh.
cybersecurity, tech, um, secure like privacy. Whereas in my personal life, I'm like, who wants my data? I'm more likely to want to use it to stream something from abroad or to get a cheaper hotel. But the sort of more technical sides of it doesn't sort of interest me and wouldn't make me convert. So that was a really interesting learning. And again, tying into that, we do see a lot of business and entrepreneurship podcasts as well.
So do you think there is those two kind of splits between the consumer base for VPNs, very much work related, on an enterprise level, and then more personal needs, like you said, streaming TV shows and accessing different features of games and products that are only available in different countries?
Yes, absolutely. There's so many consumer motivations here with a VPN. And I
Mm.
think most people aren't that concerned about their digital privacy to the extent that maybe the VPNs want them to be. But there's so many benefits to having one that I think it's still really, really possible to convert people in these different areas.
And so the actual creative side of it then, what are we seeing in these ad reads for podcasts? Are we seeing that VPN brands are trying to educate consumers about the benefits of having a VPN and the risks of not having one?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we always ensure that like it's really clear what a VPN is when we do an ad read. I think most people do know what a VPN is nowadays, but we still want people to understand what it is they're buying and how it actually protects them because we want that credibility at the end of the day. But then we do lean into different specific uses relating to people's different interests, which we think on a personal level is more likely to be what converts them.
Absolutely, yeah. And going into kind of the VPNs on what their business model is like and, what people are actually buying into. So obviously VPNs are subscription based companies. They need to have access to and find people who can pay, recurring monthly fees.
Mm.
Couple of things around this. I suppose that podcast audiences have proven that they're perfect to reach that kind of consumer base, but also that creative style of the ad read and educating people about why they should be investing in these products is also helpful to support that subscription based model where they need people to buy in for a long time.
No, absolutely. And we see podcasts as one of the more credible forms of media as well. So I feel the data really shows that people trust podcast hosts and are willing to buy into these things that do require a lot of commitment. And actually, most of the offers that podcasts show or give to their listeners aren't just a recurring monthly subscription. They're actually like a 2-year buy at, yes, maybe a massive discount, but you're investing for a couple of years. So I think a lot of trust really is needed for this investment that is for a long period of time.
Yeah, and when we're talking about like credibility and authenticity and especially, things that we've both read talk about podcast hosts, inciting really good ad recall and information recall. How do the different kinds of ways you can work with podcasts affect this? So, what are you seeing? How are you seeing VPNs work with podcasts? Is it in, host read baked in ads? Is it programmatic? Is it, dynamic ads? And do those different formats impact the overall credibility of the ads?
Yeah, absolutely. I see a lot of VPN companies advertising purely with host reads because you do have that audience to host connection. People trust that host and their expertise, their experience. So a host read ad is just seen as more likely to convert. And yes, you do pay a premium for it. But for this sort of product where trust and credibility is required, it really is worth it. We do see more producer-read ads, as I was saying earlier with ExpressVPN. There's more frequency of those, and producer-read ads are really efficient in terms of cost and ability to reactivate. Time spent needing to produce a creative. It allows you to activate with lots of different shows and test, which is obviously great. So there's loads of scope, but host reds are kind of the creme de la creme of these sorts of tech companies, specifically VPNs.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with that. And to sum up then, in general, we've talked about a lot of different areas there about features of podcasts and why VPNs are using them. But as a kind of top line, what do you think the draw for VPNs is to podcasts? What makes it such a special way of advertising for these kind of brands?
So the top line with what you're saying with VPNs and their effective how podcast marketing is such an effective customer acquisition stream is, again, as I previously mentioned, with the way that the hosts really do have that level of credibility. Audiences listen to the entire podcast. They trust what the hosts are saying. Podcasts also do tap into these niche audiences with specific interests. So, for example, really tech savvy people looking to, improve their data security, especially within business places, or people really, really interested in sport who really want to watch that specific wrestling match being broadcast in Australia next week that they can't access in their current country. So those niche interests, those trustworthy hosts, but also we really do see people who listen to podcasts are people who have, generally higher incomes. They'll listen to the podcast when they're busy doing something else. And they're usually higher up in their corporations and have more decision-making power. So they're just generally more powerful people, both financially and in other means as well.
So, one thing that we haven't touched on yet really is the fact that, VPNs are surging in popularity now in the last few years anyway. But what comes with that is that a lot of these VPN companies are quite young and quite flexible, which is, I imagine, one of the big reasons why they've been able to surge into podcasts with so much confidence and vigor, because podcasts themselves are a relatively new form of marketing. Like, it's only something that we've looked at in the last kind of 5 or 6 years, and we can see it growing in popularity every week, every month, with new people wanting to try it for the first time. And what comes with that is there are generally a lot of doubts and concerns about it as a platform because people haven't proven their success on it just yet in their specific industry or for themselves. And so we've looked at VPNs, but to address some of those kind of objections or blockers, people might assume that podcast ads are really expensive. And what about the CPMs and the results? What would you say to that, working on podcasts every day?
As somebody who's worked on both podcasts and social media customer acquisition streams, podcasts are cheaper, so much easier to negotiate cheaper rates with podcasts. They're really motivated to have a reactivation, have 10 episodes, and they do want to. Podcast hosts are really keen to monetize this stream that they've got going. So generally podcasts are a lot cheaper. You also do pay based on a CPM. So you'll never pay for more impressions than what you've achieved. You'll never pay for more impressions than what you have delivered, which is really great. And it is a lot more risk-free in that sense. This CPM model as well really does give you a larger predictability of your ROI as well. Like, generally what your usual average spend is per customer. What your offer is. For example, you're offering customers 50% off a 2-year plan. So it is quite possible to predict what your figures might look like in advance as well, which is really helpful. But of course, it's something, it is scary to start working in a new area when you maybe don't have the experience. And that's why it is really great to ensure that you're educated, you're asking the right questions where you're not. Yeah, I completely recommend it.
And it's interesting what you say about impressions and how, the costs are linked to the impressions. We know that there's loads of podcasts, the same as there are YouTube channels that have huge numbers of impressions and amazing reach. But do podcasts drive actual results and actual sales for brands like VPNs, or is it just about the awareness and spreading the message of what VPNs can do and what they can help you achieve?
I think it's both, to be honest. I mean, podcasts do drive sales. Obviously, a testing process is required because not all of them will, but they definitely do drive conversions. But also, I do think the brand awareness you get from a podcast is also quite important and useful. You've got that creative and you've got that endorsement from that host who might be a well-known figure in their niche field, but also you've got, people are hearing about the VPN, the brand, in a space where other VPNs are being talked about. You're bringing yourself into that conversation. So I think that's also quite valuable.
Yeah, and other ways, let's say hypothetically someone starts running a podcast campaign and they're a VPN and they really want to optimize that campaign to drive as many sales as possible. How do we go about doing that through podcasts?
There's so many ways we can do that. For example, incentives, free trials, extra months, discounts. That can really optimize and allow conversions to take place more easily. Buying shows on bigger scales, for example, buying 5 spots instead of 2 spots, that works out as better value. So that helps you optimize in terms of how much bang you're getting for your buck. Optimizing creatives is also a great way to drive conversions, seeing what's working, what topics of conversation are happening in these different niches is really helpful. There's so many ways that podcast advertising can be optimized.
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine it's kind of taking what we have seen on other platforms and just tweaking it slightly to just fit with the format and the niches and the different brands that are working there. But it's very much still a growing platform, and there's lots of things that are, new things that we're discovering all the time as well, which are exciting ways to make campaigns better, help them perform better, and drive even more sales than they're already able to drive. And so to recap everything then, but we've run over there. VPNs are turning to podcasts. I mean, ultimately for the opportunity, right? Because
Oh, yeah.
it's a relatively new platform. There's lots of scope for reaching their perfect audience there. They've got, like you've covered, the credibility of the creators and the ability to work closely with them and really have them endorse that message in an authentic way that their listeners are going to relate to and understand. What can other VPNs and other industries learn from this activity in general?
I would say that, brand exposure and awareness is valuable. I know about all of these brands because of podcast advertising. I've bought from these brands because I've heard about them. I might not have converted directly from that podcast, but just because I'm aware that they exist, I've been a customer. It can also, it does just demonstrate the value of and credibility of podcasts.
Well, I think that's a really good point, and it's been really interesting to see and to hear a bit more about the activity that VPNs have got on podcasts and delve into a bit more detail about perhaps why it's such a valuable platform for them and can maybe be such a valuable platform for other industries and other brands as well. So I'm interested to see, perhaps which industry we see the rise of next on podcasts, because there's definitely going to be one. So we should keep our eyes out for when that happens, and maybe we can go into more detail about that then too. So thanks for listening, everyone. If you're interested and you want some more information about anything we've talked about today, then you can follow along with Media Bodies on LinkedIn, or you can check out our website for more resources and insights on podcast advertising and influencer marketing in general. You're welcome to reach out to Rhiannon or to myself and ask us any questions and get in touch if there's anything else that you'd like to discuss. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.